UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warns that Yemen is in imminent danger of famine, a situation that could be made worse still in Houthi-controlled areas as the US mulls declaring the Iran-aligned group a terror organization. Saudi Arabia tries to improve its international image while it hosts the G20 summit focusing on COVID-19 recovery, though the gathering of the world's top economies leads to further scrutiny of the kingdom's human rights record. And Georgia's Republican governor certifies the results showing Joe Biden won the presidential race in the state, wrapping up an election that has been fraught with unfounded accusations of fraud by Donald Trump as well as his supporters. Welcome to the France 24 newsroom in Paris. I'm Alexandre Orcott. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has warned that Yemen is in imminent danger of famine. Meanwhile, the United States is threatening to classify the Houthi rebels in the country as terrorists, a move that could have severe consequences on humanitarian aid in the region. James Facina explains.
A devastating situation that could be about to get even worse. It's difficult to measure the pain caused by the 6-year civil war in Yemen, but fatalities are long believed to have exceeded 100,000, which includes over 12,000 civilian deaths. With 80% of the population in need of help, Yemen is the world's largest humanitarian crisis.
We see a dramatic degradation of the humanitarian situation, and the risk, as it was expressed this morning in my statement, the risk of a famine that probably would have had no parallel in the recent history except the famous famine of Ethiopia many decades ago.
Acute malnutrition is widespread across the country, with over 98,000 children under the age of 5 at risk of dying.
The 2 children have acute malnutrition with complications. Last week, they received treatment, but their condition did not improve due to complications as a result of pneumonia.
While the United Nations remains hopeful that progress towards a ceasefire between government forces and the Houthi rebels is being made, the organisation is warning against any unilateral moves. The Trump administration has threatened to label the Iranian-backed rebels a terrorist organisation as part of its maximum pressure campaign against Tehran. But it's civilians who could end up paying the price, as the decision would limit contact with rebels and cripple aid deliveries. Humanitarian assistance has already been impacted over the previous months, with record low funding throughout the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Ugandan pop star turned presidential candidate Bobi Wine has now been released on bail after being charged with holding rallies likely to spread the coronavirus. At least 37 people were killed and some 600 others arrested as the military was deployed across Kampala to quash the demos that followed his detention on Wednesday. It comes as presidential campaigns begin ahead of the voting in January, where Yoweri Museveni, the ruler since 1986, is seeking another term.
Visibly haggard after spending 2 days in prison, pop star turned presidential candidate Bobi Wine is finally released on bail. The popular musician seems even more determined than ever to contend in Uganda's upcoming elections. Speaking about his time in custody, he said, "I was arrested, tortured, threatened with death, but I did not break my resolve. I promised the people of Uganda that I will not abandon them on a journey we started together. We must finish it together, and that's when we have removed a dictator from power." Police in Uganda say they arrested Bobi Wine for holding rallies that breached coronavirus restrictions in the country. The 38-year-old's arrest and that of another presidential candidate, Patrick Amuriat, sparked deadly protests across Uganda, with security forces clashing with demonstrators. It's the second time Bobi Wine has been arrested this month alone. The popular musician is in the running to unseat President Museveni, one of Africa's longest-serving rulers. The 76-year-old is open to secure a 6th term in office. While Museveni has been praised for promoting economic growth in Uganda, his government has been criticised for corruption in the country.
Now, Saudi Arabia's hosting of the G20 summit this Saturday is already sparking controversy. While it gives the de facto ruler, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, a chance to showcase his ambitious plans to transform the country, it continues to face allegations of human rights abuses, such as locking up political activists. Maria Sofos has more.
Saudi Arabia had high hopes when it took over the G20 presidency in December 2019, offering a potential face-saving exercise as the country's reputation on the world stage continues to deteriorate. But instead of in-person meetings and photo opportunities in the kingdom's opulent palaces, this year's Leaders' Summit will mostly be virtual due to COVID-19. As well as rehabilitating Riyadh's image, a global summit was expected to help garner support for modernising reforms launched by de facto ruler Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi Arabia's reputation has been battered since 2018, with an international uproar over the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, the war in Yemen, and the continued detention of women's rights activists arrested that year. In Paris on Thursday, demonstrators projected portraits of the jailed women on the Louvre Museum and called on the French government to demand the release of those imprisoned.
This is a seduction by Saudi Arabia in order to restore its image internationally. In reality, this contrasts enormously with the human rights situation there. This hypocrisy must stop. Emmanuel Macron must call on the Saudi authorities to release the activists and demand the kingdom respect human rights.
In October, the European Parliament passed a non-binding resolution urging the EU to downgrade its delegation at the summit to avoid legitimising impunity for human rights violations. While critics of Saudi Arabia will be hoping to see the kingdom challenged on a number of issues this weekend, the scaled-back summit may not be the opportunity. Unsurprisingly, at the top of the agenda is the COVID-19 pandemic and its grave economic impact.
Top election officials in the US state of Georgia have certified the results of the presidential vote there, confirming Joe Biden's victory over Donald Trump. The Republican governor of the state also, Brian Kemp, has now certified the state's slate of 16 presidential electors, though he did say that the audit revealed significant errors. Yinka Oyatade explains.
It's another setback for President Donald Trump's bid to overturn election results in the battleground state of Georgia. Officials there have now certified Joe Biden's win, following an audit of votes cast in the state. Over 5 million ballots were painstakingly counted by hand. The recount found that Biden beat Trump by more than 12,000 votes.
Working as an engineer throughout my life, I live by the motto that numbers don't lie. As Secretary of State, I believe that the numbers that we have presented today are correct. Like other Republicans, I'm disappointed our candidate didn't win Georgia's electoral votes.
The certification of Biden's victory in Georgia comes amid Trump's relentless cries of voter fraud. His campaign has taken out largely baseless lawsuits in several states, all of which have so far been unsuccessful. Trump's chance to contest results in Georgia is not completely off the table. The governor, Brian Kemp, an ally of the president, says the audit revealed significant errors.
It's quite honestly hard to believe that during the audit, thousands of uncounted ballots were found weeks after a razor-thin outcome in a presidential election. State law now requires the governor's office to formalize the certification, which paves the way for the Trump campaign to pursue other legal options in a separate recount if they choose.
Biden is projected to have won 306 electoral votes in the U.S.'s electoral college system. This far above the 270 needed to win the election. The results in Georgia show a historic win for the Democrats, who have not been able to secure a victory in the state in nearly 3 decades.
In recent weeks, walls and buildings here in France have been plastered with slogans highlighting the mistreatment of women across the country. Each year, some 220,000 women are victims of physical and sexual violence or moral harassment committed by their current or former partners. On the back of the global Me Too movement, more and more women are coming out to say enough is enough. Our team has spent the past year following some of those calling for change, and here's an extract of their report.
The statements made by victims are constantly called into question. According to the General Inspectorate of the Justice System, 80% of complaints made to police about domestic violence are shelved. The first step, making it through the doors of the police station, is the main obstacle for many women. Refusal to accept their complaints, minimalizing the violence inflicted on them, making them feel guilty. To stop this kind of malpractice, Fabienne decided to act. 10 years ago, she started a training program for her fellow officers.
We know there can be failures in terms of the reception and treatment of certain complaints. Today, the police force is examining its own conscience. We've put in place training programs in order to avoid all those things that were said and that perhaps took place. I'm not saying they didn't happen, but we're doing all we can to make sure they don't happen again. I don't know what image you have of a police officer. Sometimes there's an image of a police officer who doesn't ever let up, who does this or who doesn't do that, and who speaks to victims in a very detached manner to protect themselves in some way. But we can also show empathy. From the first person a woman sees when she enters a police station, trust needs to be established. Reception desks are maybe not particularly private places, so it's your job to make women feel like they're in a confidential environment. Be careful. It's up to you to open the discussion, to listen. You should never be on your mobile phone, or if you hear your colleague sharing a joke, don't start laughing with them without paying attention to the person talking to you. This is a serious job. During these training sessions, I try to be as thorough as possible, so my colleagues really understand what a woman who's a victim of domestic violence is going through. The fact that she's trapped in a circle of violence, that she's under someone's control. You need to have this in your head each time you're faced with a victim of domestic violence. Have you ever heard about a woman who's made a complaint, but then decided to drop it? It's there. The explanation is there. It's all there. The tension. Things are going badly or starting to go badly. We'll take the example of physical violence. It's the most telling. The crisis. He hits her, it makes a noise, and the neighbors or the woman herself calls the police. She may or may not be taken to the hospital, the complaint is made, it's over, she wants out. I'm caricaturing, but more or less that's what it's like. And then he comes back to her. It's true, I hit you, it's true. But did you see what you made for dinner? Frankly, it was disgusting. I've worked all day, and in the evening I come home, and that's what I find. Put yourself in my shoes. That's right. He's justifying himself by making her feel guilty. I promise it won't happen again. I'll take you to a restaurant. I'll take you on holiday. She drops the complaint.
We can watch the full version of that report on our website, france24.com. Well, with France in lockdown, only essentials are allowed to be sold across the country. Though with Christmas just around the corner, the government has now added Christmas trees to the list of allowed items, sparking a flurry of activity from producers to town decorators, all rushing to give 2020 some Christmas cheer. Fraser Jackson has the story.
It could be considered a Christmas miracle. With little else to smile about this year, some festive cheer is popping up in town centres across France as they put up their Christmas trees in town centres and shopping centres. Known for its Christmas market, Strasbourg welcomed back its iconic Grand Sapin at a height of 30 metres.
Il est superbe comme tous les ans. On a hâte qu'il soit illuminé maintenant.
With France under lockdown, only essential items are allowed to be sold. Last week, the government added Christmas trees to that list. Although still closed, this florist is allowed to sell trees outdoors. They've ordered 80 that will soon have new homes.
Oh, c'est triste, hein? Oui. Un Noël sans sapin quand même.
Et pas de cadeaux, pas de fêtes, pas de plaisir, quoi. Enfin, pas d'euphorie pour les enfants.
Trees make up a big chunk of this florist's annual income, which has been decimated by the pandemic.
Noël, c'est beaucoup de chiffre d'affaires pour nous. Et c'est sûr que le fait de pouvoir avoir le droit de les vendre en direct, ça change la donne.
After news of the decree, Christmas tree producers kicked into high gear. Most come from the Morvan National Park in the east, and Christmas can make up over a quarter of their yearly sales.
Ils vont faire à peu près 700-750 sapins qui vont être coupés aujourd'hui et préparés.
For most producers, the government's decision to authorize the sale of Christmas trees came just in time.
Heureusement, là, on vient de le savoir, parce que passé le 20 novembre, après, c'est trop tard. On aurait pris trop de retard à pas couper des sapins, on n'aurait pas pu livrer nos clients en temps et en heure.
And he has his work cut out for him. Last year, the French bought almost 6 million trees.
Stay tuned for more updates on France 24.